Hello, welcome to another Trek Sumo video review, and this time I'm going to be reviewing the Garmin InReach Mini. This is primarily a safety device. It does also have some basic kind of navigation and tracking functionality, but I think for the vast majority of users, you're going to buy it because you want something that can keep you a little bit safer if you're out and about somewhere out of phone signal and you want the ability to call for help. And if that's what you're after, then this is probably just what you're looking for. So I'll talk you through some of the features, explain a little bit about how it works, what you get, some of the pros and cons with it. To start with, looking at the build, it's pretty tiny, as you can see. It literally fits in the palm of a hand. It can hang off a belt or off a rucksack with a little clip and a carabiner that clips to a webbing strap. You can remove this and add on a different type of mount that allows you to slot it into a number of third-party or separately purchased mounts that you could put on a boat or in the cockpit of a plane or even on perhaps the handlebars of a bike or motorcycle. But for hikers, this is probably what you're going to need. It's ruggedly built. It's got this kind of rubberized plastic feel and this hard orange case in this sort of classic safety orange color. You can also get it in black, which is a bit more unobtrusive, but the orange does work quite well, particularly if you want to be able to see it if you drop it into snow or into water or just in the dark or something like that. It's got essentially 6 buttons, a power button on the very top. You then have up and down arrows on the left-hand side, an OK and a back button on the right-hand side, and then the SOS button itself. Obviously, it's these 4 buttons, the up and down, the OK and the back, that you're going to use primarily for navigation. The power button literally just turns it on and off, and the SOS button only has one use, which I'll come on to. Navigation is pretty straightforward. You're going through menu items, click into them with the OK, click out of them, or back to the previous menu with the back button. So it's not hard to get used to. You've also got a charging port behind a little rubber panel on the side. That makes it reasonably waterproof. It's rated, I think, to IPX7, which means it's waterproof in heavy rain or in brief immersion into water. It's not suitable, certainly for diving, and I probably wouldn't use it for extended swimming. You can get a dive case for it, which makes it waterproof to, I believe, 100 meters. And we'll come on to why or if you might want to use it for diving or swimming towards the end. One thing that is quite important to say about it to begin with is that it won't do anything much if you don't have a subscription. And that's something it reminds you of very kindly when you turn it on, with a little note to warn you that you're going to require a subscription, particularly for the safety functionality, but actually for anything that it does, really. The subscriptions are available in a bunch of different options at various prices, and mainly what it changes is the number of messages that you get, or the number of weather reports that you can get, or the number of tracking points that you can submit. The safety functionality, as long as you have a subscription, you get that regardless. There's no variation in the quality of safety cover for the SOS button, depending on the subscription. It's all of the other extraneous things around it. The subscriptions are also quite well designed in that it's easy to add a level of subscription or remove it, or just have a high level for 1 month and then go back to a base level for the rest of the year. So depending on what you need and what trips you're planning, you don't have to be stuck in a subscription that you're really not going to be using for 11 months of the year, just so that you have safety cover for your one big trip or something like that. If we talk then a little bit about the functionality, it probably makes sense to start with the SOS button itself. This is the simplest part of it, really. There's not too much to talk about. You've got the SOS button here. This itself you can't press. It's a cover. That's deliberately designed, of course, to avoid accidentally activating it. So you just pull the cover back, you then have that button in there, and you would press and hold that until the safety activates, and you'll get a beep and an alert on the screen. There's no ability to test that. There's no kind of test mode, so I'm not going to activate it now for the purposes of the review, and I have never activated it at any point. So, of course, it's a little bit hard to comment on how that works. But really, a lot of that is not down to Garmin. What Garmin does is it transmits that signal to a 24/7 incident management center run by a company called GEOS. That used to be an independent company. It's now actually been purchased by Garmin. So all of that is managed by Garmin. They will respond by text message to ask for additional details, and you can submit that by message through the device. But of course, if you don't respond, that's fine. They're still going to process your SOS message. what they will do then is they've of course got your location, they'll look at where you're located, and they'll give that information to the relevant local search and rescue or emergency service. So really from that point on, the quality of rescue or the quality of assistance you're going to get is purely down to the local agency, and that's really out of Garmin's control. I would love to hear from anybody who's used this in the real world or for a real rescue and what happened. I've heard stories about it being used. It's always been very successful. Quite a number of people credit this with saving their life. So I think we can take it as read that the SOS does work extremely well. The actual satellite cover you get is with Iridium. The Iridium network provides extremely wide-ranging cover all across the world, including in very, very remote places like the Arctic Circle, up mountains and so on. There are always areas where coverage might be spotty, and if you're going somewhere extremely remote, that might be something you'd need to look into and just make sure that you're going to have the cover. But the Iridium network is about as good as it gets, and certainly I've never had any issues with coverage on this. So aside from the SOS, is there anything that you would use this for, and is it worth having, or is it purely as a backup? Well, I'd say yes, it is still worth having. And the nice thing is that even though you hope never to use the SOS functionality on this, there are still going to be some benefits you'll get from taking it on a trip. Probably the biggest one for me is the text messaging ability. So it can use the Iridium network to send text messages even when you don't have phone signal. And as anyone who's done hiking will have discovered, you don't have to go very far up a mountain. You don't even have to be particularly remote in the UK to lose phone signal. And it's really nice just to be able to send a reassuring message to somebody and say, I'm okay, I'm having a good day, or maybe something you need to communicate with them, like I'm delayed by an hour if they're picking you up, or just tell them where you are so that they can come and get you. All these kinds of things that might have nothing to do with an emergency, but it's just nice to be able to communicate with people when you're out of phone signal. And you can do that through the device. The number of messages you get does depend on the subscription level you have. The base level, you get an unlimited number of predefined messages to predefined people. So you can set those up in advance, 3 predefined messages with a preset recipient. So for example, I could set up a message that says, I'm at the pickup point, and that's going to be sent to my partner. And I can send that an unlimited number of times, but that's preset. I can't change who it goes to or what the message says. And I can have 3 of those. For more kind of standard text messages where you write them and choose who you send to on the fly, with the base level, you get 10 of those a month, and that includes responses. So any responses to your text messages come out of that number. Also weather reports, which I'll come on to, come out of that number. So 10 isn't a lot, but for many people that will be more than sufficient. And if you want more, you can pay for a high level of subscription. As far as actually writing the text messages goes, it's obviously not particularly easy. You don't have a full keypad on this. You can go into messages and you have the ability to select a predefined message, and you can select from the 3 that are in there, or you can draft a new message and you scroll through letters, select a letter, and then select each letter one at a time. The good thing though is that it does have quite good predictive text, so you can often draft the message you want simply through the predictive text, which works very similar to on a smartphone where it has a library of words and is very good at predicting the words that are likely to follow on after the one that you've put. So in fact, you can often draft a message quite quickly with this. But there is an even better way to do it, which is that you can pair it with your phone. And of course, Garmin likes to have a different application for everything for some reason. So the Garmin EarthMate app is the one you want for pairing with the InReach. And that gives you the ability to, as long as you've got a Bluetooth connection between the two, to send and receive messages and write them, obviously using your smartphone keyboard, which is much, much easier, and still send them through the Iridium network. So even when your phone is out of signal, you'll essentially still get text messaging through the app. And that's really useful. And the same goes for all of the features that I'm going to talk about. So the mapping, which is pretty limited on the device itself, but you can get full color maps on the phone as long as it's linked. Same with the weather reports. You get quite nice but simple black and white weather reports coming through on the Garmin. You get them in full color on the phone. So if you keep your phone charged, and if you're out for a short enough hike that you're going to be able to keep your phone charged, and you can keep that Bluetooth connection, then you kind of get the best of both worlds of full color mapping, full color weather reports, full keyboard, etc., but through the Iridium network, through this little device. You can see it as almost an add-on to your smartphone. If you don't want to do that, or you're not going to be able to keep your phone charged, you're out for too long, that's fine. You can still do everything through the device itself. So aside from messaging, probably the next thing, you're going to be able to receive messages back. This doesn't have a phone number of its own, so people don't text you in the normal way. You can give them a unique link to a form. They go onto the website, enter a text message into the form and submit it, and that will be sent to your device. So they can't simply text back. But that does work quite well if people do need to send you a message. You've got tracking on here, obviously using GPS, and that can send tracking points, and those are placed on a map, and you can give that link to somebody who wants to follow your progress. It's very similar to how it works on something like the Garmin Tactics Delta or the Garmin Fenix, which has live tracking. The difference is that on the InReach, you pay for every point, or depending on your subscription, you might get a limited number of points, or you might get a certain number of points free. With the basic level subscription, you only get 10 points a month. So really, you could only give a few locations during the course of a hike. Obviously, with the Tactics Delta and the Fenix, it's free. But the big difference is that with those devices, it's reliant on having data on your phone. So with the Tactics Delta, when I'm tracking, it's obviously getting GPS signal through the watch, but it's transmitting that to the phone, and the phone is then updating the website. So as soon as I lose data on my phone, that will no longer update. That's completely different to the InReach, where that will continue to update regardless of whether you have phone coverage, regardless of whether it's even linked to a phone. As long as it's getting the Iridium satellite cover, you'll continue to update those points, but you pay for them. So it's a different model, much more suitable when you're somewhere really remote and you want to be able to update people, but you will pay for it. It has GPS on here. I'm inside, so it's not going to connect very quickly, but I will insert some shots into the video of when I was outside to show you what that screen looks like. The real limitation here is that by default, it will show GPS only in latitude and longitude. You do have the ability to show military grid reference system and UTM, but what for UK hikers is massively lacking is Ordnance Survey grid reference format. And I think that's a real limitation of this, and something that would make this much, much less useful to UK hikers, because if you're following on a map, you will only have Ordnance Survey grid reference. Everything is provided in Ordnance Survey grid references. That's how we work in the UK for hiking. And you'd want to be able to look at this, see the grid reference and relate it to the map. If all you have is latitude and longitude, that's massively harder to do. The Tactics Delta and the Fenix and a lot of the other hiking watches provide loads of different grid reference formats, and that's really useful. So you can pick the one relevant to where you are in the world, and in the UK, that will be Ordnance Survey. Of course, the InReach, from a safety point of view, latitude and longitude is okay. If you give that to a rescue agency, they will be able to make use of that. They probably in the UK prefer an OS grid reference, but I'm sure that the Coast Guard or Mountain Rescue or the police can use a latitude and longitude, and that's fine. Similarly, if you're using it out at sea, if you're a yachter or a kayaker or something, latitude and longitude is going to be great. But for just using it as your main navigation device, I think that makes it much, much less useful than it would otherwise be. And that is a bit of a shame. I don't know if that's a deliberate limitation to avoid kind of cannibalizing some of their other devices, or simply that they're focusing much more on the safety use case, or what the reason might be behind that. You can also do very basic tracking on it. You can insert points, and it will show you, just guide you in the direction of those points, and that's it. On the device itself, there's no mapping, there's no even a line to follow. But of course, as I said, if you've synced it with your phone, or you've got a Bluetooth connection with your phone, and you've downloaded the full color maps onto your phone, you can get European and UK maps for free. Then you'll be able to get your GPS location from the InReach Mini and the full color mapping on your phone, and that'd be quite useful for navigation. And then the final one is the weather reports. These come in 4 styles, essentially. You get basic, premium, and then marine basic and marine premium. The marine ones are obviously much more relevant to out at sea, so they follow kind of more the shipping forecast style. The premium and basic are more relevant on land, so they would be closer to what you would get on a conventional weather app, and in fact, what you would get on Dark Sky, which is what powers this, which is great news because Dark Sky is brilliant. A lot of hikers use it anyway. I think it's extremely reliable and precise, and that's what you get here. when you request a weather forecast, if again, it really depends on your subscription, what you will pay. If you're on the lowest level subscription, then a basic forecast will cost you one of your text messages for the month. If you've already gone over or you need more, or you go for a premium one, you will simply pay a bit extra, and you can look at the exact costs of that on the website. If you have a more fully featured subscription, then you may get many more forecasts or unlimited free basic forecasts. And again, those options and tiers are available. The difference is how many days you get and how granular the forecast is. So with the basic forecast, you get 48 hours of forecast. For the first day, it's more granular. I think it's in 2-hour increments. And then for the second day, it goes down to 6-hour increments. And for the premium forecast, you get a full 7 days and you get it more granular to begin with. And then again, going down to 6-hour increments towards the end. The information you get is really good. You can view it all on here. Again, I will insert some other footage from outside because it takes a bit longer to get the weather forecast inside because it's all coming through the satellite network. But you get precipitation, wind, temperature, etc. All of that kind of information you need. It's all really easy to view on the device, so you can just see what the weather's going to be on the go, but you can also get it on the phone if you want it in color and a little bit easier to read. And that is a really key safety feature, because if you're out on particularly a multi-day forecast where no matter how careful you've been to check the forecast before you leave, it's likely to change over the next 3 or 4 days. And when people get into trouble when they're hiking, a lot of the time it's because the weather changes unexpectedly and they don't realize it, or they don't take the appropriate action when the weather does change. And just having more of a sense of what's going to happen over the next 48 hours, what kind of wind and snow and temperature conditions you can expect, that will help you to make sensible decisions about where to go, whether to carry on, whether to turn back, all those kinds of things. And that's really everything. So in a way, it's quite simple. But for me, it's almost a mandatory device now for my personal risk tolerance for safety when I'm hiking. I don't do particularly demanding or dangerous hikes, but as I've said before, you don't have to go very far, even in the UK, to be out of phone coverage. And if you're out of phone coverage, then it really doesn't matter if you are, a couple of miles from the nearest town or 100 miles from the nearest town, because if you get injured and you're not able to make it back to civilization, it's just as easy to get yourself in real difficulty a mile or two from help if no one knows you're there. So having this, it just gives you that extra peace of mind. It makes me feel a little bit more confident about doing hikes that I might not otherwise have done, particularly doing them solo. And even without the SOS, even if I'm never going to use it, and I certainly hope I never will, being able to send a message, being able to keep people up to date when I'm out of phone coverage for a day or two is really useful. And of course, being able to get the weather when I don't have data on my phone, and it might be 3 days since I was last able to check the weather on a phone app. That again helps me to keep safe and confident in what I'm doing. And again, that just lets me push slightly and do the kinds of hikes that I might otherwise not have been able to do, and particularly not have been able to do on my own. Of course, the downside of that is that there is a concern that when people have this kind of device, it could encourage them to do things that are risky, and simply to assume that they can go out and do all kinds of dangerous activities and then call for help when it goes wrong. And that's certainly not something that I would recommend. And clearly, when people take these kind of devices, it should be seen as an absolute last resort, and they should still be doing things that are within their own abilities, with the appropriate equipment, with all of the required safety considerations first. So think about who it is for. I focus very much on hikers, and I think by and large it probably will be hikers that use this, but I can see a number of other use cases for it. Particularly, I mentioned earlier, sailors and kayakers. If you're in a small boat, obviously larger yachts tend to have a lot of safety devices anyway, radios and personal distress beacons and flares and so on. But if I were in a dinghy doing some offshore sailing, or in a kayak, or even a stand-up paddleboard on a nice day in Brighton, people do get swept out to sea, and it's happened a few times tragically where people have been swept out to sea on a nice day. Having something like this could make all the difference, because of course you can ask for help, and then your location can be tracked on an ongoing basis. So if you're moving, if you're being swept in a current, it'll be much easier for people to find you. Pilots, again, Garmin market it to pilots. I mentioned that in the blog post when I first reviewed this, and I think somebody with a PPL came back and said, yes, absolutely, this is the kind of thing that they would carry in a small plane. partly because it gives them the ability to send a message when they might be out of phone signal. But more importantly, if they go down somewhere, have a forced landing, and they want to be able to call for help, this is exactly the kind of thing that you want. So that makes sense to me. I also mentioned scuba divers and the fact that you can get a dive case for it. I think it's a slightly odd device for scuba divers because it won't work underwater, and there's really no point giving a precise location if you need help underwater. If somebody needs assistance underwater, it's a very, very different kind of situation, and this simply wouldn't work at any kind of depth that divers operate at. So I did kind of wonder, why would you bother with it? But I think for some scuba divers in certain situations, particularly ones that are doing dives a long way from land, or drift dives where they're going to move away from the boat, or just are concerned about surfacing and either having a problematic ascent and they need help immediately on surfacing, or worried about getting separated from their group or from the boat, this could be something that they might want to take with them. And obviously, once you surface, you could use it to call for help. I can't really see it being something that I would recommend all scuba divers taking with them. It just seems like an extraneous piece of equipment, and by and large, more kit on scuba divers is not a good thing. But I'm sure there are cases where scuba divers might find this useful, or a little bit of extra reassurance, and that obviously is down to them. Hopefully this little overview has been useful and you'll have enjoyed the video. If you have, of course, as always, we would love it if you would give it a like and subscribe to the channel and watch some of our other videos, and that way you'll be notified when we post more reviews in the future. We've got loads of things coming up. James is posting reviews all the time. I've got a load of equipment that I still haven't reviewed, so you're going to be seeing those video reviews come out. I've also got a trip coming up that I'll be doing a little video about that might be of interest. And of course, visit the blog at trucksumo.com if you haven't already. Thank you very much.